as the ants interact, they're going to be establishing some social behavior, and that is really interesting. But I have some easier examples. For example, I actually have explained this example several times with you in class, and that is the one of water. Because remember, we have oxygen and we have hydrogen, and as they are both gases, remember that gases, the molecules of gases, always come with two atoms. Every gas in its natural state is going to come with two atoms. They are going to be joined together. They are always becoming in pairs. But as these two types of elements, as these two elements, oxygen and hydrogen, interact, they're going to be forming something new. And this something new is water. And remember that water has some pretty interesting properties. We saw some of them in geography, actually, when we were seeing the snowflake formation. Do you remember that? Do you remember the angle between the two atoms of hydrogen? Do you remember it was 104 I don't remember quite, 102.4, if I am not wrong, more or less. It is higher than 100, but it is really close to 100. 102.4, if I am not wrong. And that is going to be giving it polar properties. You remember that the upper part of the molecule is going to be positive and the lower part of the molecule is going to be negative. So these properties, and also water in its natural state is going to be liquid, and these two previous molecules are not going to be liquid, are going to be gases, right? So these properties about being polar, having a positive charge in the top part of the molecule and a negative charge in the lower part of the molecule, this molecule being liquid when these previous parts were gases, these are going to be emergent properties, because as these elements interact, they are going to give birth to new properties. And societies are exactly the same way. Societies and culture are exactly the same way. But let me give you another example, an easier example perhaps. And this is the example that I heard in school, with which I learned about emergentism, and it is about a cow. You may take a cow and you may turn it into steaks, and you're going to be dividing the cow into steaks, and then you're going to be taking all the steaks that you got out of the cow, and you are going to be joining them together. But the question is, if you get all the pieces, all the steaks that you took out of the cow, and you join them together, are you going to have a cow? Of course not. The cow is lost, the cow is dead, and you're not going to recover it if you bring all the steaks together. Why? Because the thing that was making the cow a cow was the relations that all these parts had between each other. And now that you turn those relations apart and you made the cow into steaks, it doesn't matter if you have all the parts, all the elements. The thing that was making the cow up was the relation between those elements, not only the elements. So you may have every single steak that you took, every single piece of meat that you took out of the cow, and even if you put them together, you're not going to have a cow, because the cow is not the elements, the cow is not the steaks, the cow is the relation between its parts. And cultures are exactly the same thing. If you think about your activity, you were able to produce a huge amount of figures using just two elements, a circle and a triangle. And if you see, these figures have emergent properties, because, for example, think about this location pin. If I see a circle and a triangle, they are going to tell me, well, we have some geometric figures, right? Some Euclidean geometry. But if I see a location pin, then I am going to be thinking about places, about latitude and longitude, yes, about coordinates. So it has emergent properties, because it is going to be giving me a different meaning. All of these figures that you draw over here are going to be giving you different meaning, and those meanings are emergent meanings. And the same thing happens with cultures, because you may have all these elements together, you may have all these elements throughout all the societies that lived in Middle America, and that doesn't mean that they are the same thing. Diffusionism loses its reason to exist as a theory, as a way to explain things, if you take this into into consideration, because think about this. Well, I am going to see another example before we move forward, because I really enjoyed this one. In terms of cybernetics, it is really interesting, because if you see over here, the only thing that your classmate changed in here was the position of the triangle with respect to the circle. So if the triangle is over here, then it is a girl. But if the triangle is over here, then it is an ice cream. But if the triangle is over here, then it is a fish. And if we take other examples that you used, if the triangle is over here, then it is a mountain with the sun in its back. And if we put the triangle over here, then it is a wizard. And if we put the triangle, I don't know, which other example did you like? Well, the location pin. Right over here we have a location pin. And over here, if we use a different type of triangle, we have the ball going down a slope, right? So the only thing that is changing is the position of the triangle with respect to the circle. And just by changing the position of the triangle, I am getting a different result. Why? Because the relation between the circle and the triangle is different, and as the relations change, then what I get, the result is different. So that is the first thing that we need to have into consideration when we are studying Middle America. Why? Because a lot of the people that are actually specialists in Middle America have this idea about Middle America being a common culture, and that is absolutely false, because they may have elements in common, and that is the clue. They are elements, but these elements that they have in common are not whole systems. All these societies are going to be playing with these elements in different ways, and as they play with these elements in different ways, they're going to be obtaining very different things, very different meanings. So we have to be really careful with not confusing one culture within Middle America to another, not doing this exercise about saying, well, this figure over here is obviously the god of the rain over here, and over here is also the god of the rain, and also over here is the god of the rain, and over here is also the god of the rain, because that is absolutely false. All these elements have different meanings for each society, and that is what you need to understand. These elements, as they interact together in different ways, result in different meanings for the different cultures. The fact that we have the same elements in display, that we have the same elements in several cultures, doesn't mean that they mean the same for every culture. They actually don't. Every culture has a different meaning for things. So it doesn't matter if you have the same elements. The thing that matter are the relations. And as the relations change, and as the interaction between those elements change, then those cultures are simply different, and we need to accept that every single society is unique because of this same fact. We all eat. Yes, Levi-Strauss will tell you, yes, we all eat, but we all eat in a different way. We all use different tools. Perhaps it's only our hands, perhaps it's only tortillas, perhaps it is spoons and forks, perhaps we eat crickets, perhaps we eat bats, perhaps we eat steaks like these ones. But that doesn't matter. The fact is that, well, actually, that is the thing that matters. Sorry. The thing that matters is that we all do the things in different ways. That is the thing that matters when we are talking about culture. When we are talking about culture, what is important are the differences, because everything that is common to humanity is not culture, is nature. The thing that is particular to each society, that is culture. So there is no point in just saying that all these cultures have these elements in common, because that is not culture. Culture and being able to understand different cultures is being able to understand how they are different. And the first way in which we may understand how they are different is by taking into consideration that they may have the same elements at play, but they are going to be different between each other. So yes, I have to I have to realize that this class is going to be longer than the rest of the other classes. I'm sorry about that. So now that we know about emergentism, we can come to study Middle America, and taking into consideration that Middle America has several societies and that each one of those societies has a different culture, and we cannot disappear those differences, because disappearing the differences between each society is disappearing culture. So remember that I told you that Middle America is usually divided into three periods. The pre-classic period, that is mostly about the Olmec culture. The classic period, that is going to be huge. It is really important, and I am going to take also a huge time explaining this one, because it is mainly about the Maya culture and the Teotihuacan culture, and it is going to be great because actually these two societies are going to be interacting between each other. We're going to have some rulers in the Mayan cities that are apparently coming from Teotihuacan, and the last discoveries in Teotihuacan show that the royalty in Teotihuacan were from the Mayan area. So the relation between these two cultures is going to be huge, really important in terms of culture and in terms of Middle America. Then we have this transition period called the Epiclassic, in which we are going to be having societies such as Xochicalco, the Toltecs, and so on. And finally, we get to the post-classic period that usually is going to be considered through the Aztecs. Usually people call them Aztecs. The right name is Mexicas, but okay, most people call them Aztecs. I have never heard the name of Mexicas in English. I only know in English Aztecs, but in Spanish the right name is not Aztecs, it's Mexicas. And also some Oaxacan societies such as the Mixtecs are going to be living throughout the Epic Classic and the Post-Classic period. But now we're going to be starting in the Pre-Classic period. And as I was telling you, the Pre-Classic period is all about the Olmecs, or at least it is the most important society here. But first we need to make a differentiation here, because when we say Olmecs, we mean two things. We may be meaning two things: the society of the Olmecs, or the style called the Olmec style. And this style that mostly includes this type of figures that are called baby faces. That is actually the archaeological name of these figures, baby faces. If you go to Google and just Google Olmec baby faces or just baby faces, they are going to be showing you all these figures. And this Olmec style is going to be spread throughout most Middle America. Just remember that the fact that you have common elements doesn't mean that they mean the same thing. They mean different things for each society. But this stylistic style is going to be present in most of Middle America by the pre-classic. But the thing that we are going to be studying today is Olmecs as a society. So if you remember, Middle America is divided into five smaller regions. So the Olmecs, which is shown over here in Tabasco and Veracruz, are from the Gulf region. This is the first region that we are studying. It is the Gulf region. So this region precisely about Veracruz and Tabasco, and this is where Olmecs lived. And the Olmecs are known as the first civilization in Middle America. So remember that I told you that Middle America is usually referred to be lasting from 5,000 to 3,000 years, and that I supported the most version in which Middle America lasted 3,000 years, from 1500 before Christ to 1500 after Christ. Well, this is why. Do you remember that when we were deconstructing this concept about civilization in the first period, we were talking about that a civilization is a racist word, but that we could replace it if we would only understand that by civilization we are talking about two things: societies ruled by a state with a settlement pattern, a particular settlement pattern that is the city. So this is what is going to be born with the Olmecs. The Olmecs apparently are going to be the first state with cities in Middle America. Before them we have other types of settlement, for example, well, of course, hunter-gatherers that are going to be hordes, Or we also have one very interesting concept that is called a ceremonial center. And a ceremonial center is going to be a religious unit of production. It is really funny because you have like this temple, and everything surrounding this temple is going to be producing food and well, many products in order to support the temple in the center of the region. So that is going to be like the previous way of organization.